are going through an illicit relationship. The husband, the uncle does not, he takes it at face value, and he just, without contemplating and thinking, he just goes ahead and spills it out to Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. Abu Dharr now rages up and he says, every goodness that you have given us, you have nullified. All the kindness you have shown to us today, everything is gone. We completely disown you. And he leaves immediately with his brother and his mother, and they go out. And Abu Dharr al-Ghifari says, I saw my uncle wrapping, putting his cloak over his head, and he was weeping, he was crying, and he was saying to himself, I have destroyed myself. Basically he was saying, I did not think, and I just spoke out of anger, and this has now destroyed my ties with my nephew. And this guy, Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, comes across and he camps outside on the outskirts of Al-Makkah, somewhere in the region, the region of Al-Baida. So he camps there, and then Unais, the brother of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, goes into Mecca for some business. He wants to go around and see if he can find some jobs so he can earn some money and he could bring back. When he goes into Mecca, he hears the news that there is this man going around and giving a da'wah to worship one God, do not worship the idols, and come back, and he's giving to talk about al-akhirah and so on and so forth. And then he talks to the people. Someone says he's a liar, someone says he's a magician, someone says he's a madman. So he collects all this random information about one person, multiple information coming across. So he brings the news back to the brother. Hey, you know what? Back in Mecca, there is this man who is coming up with the religion of Tawheed and giving da'wah to the people. Abu Dharr says, what do the people say about him? Some say he is the most trustworthy. Some say he is the most honest man, and some say that he is a madman. Some say he is a one who is possessed by a sorcerer. So he gave all the versions. He said, Abu Dharr said, okay, let me go out and find out for myself. So he did not believe the CNN and the Fox News and and the NBCs of the world. So he actually wanted to find out the truth. So he went to the horse's mouth himself. So he made the trip to Mecca, and he comes across, and he's standing next to the Kaaba, and there are people making tawaf and so on and so forth. He says, brother, can you introduce me to Muhammad? That's all he said. All he said was, can someone show me Muhammad? Can someone guide me to Muhammad? The people came and said, hey, this man is looking for Muhammad. They just came across and just bashed him. He was punched from all sides, and when he got up, he said, I was like Nusub Amir. Nusub Amir was the stone where they used to slaughter the animal. So when you slaughter the animal, the rock is always filled with blood. So he was saying, I was filled with blood. It is him saying poetically that I was like a red pole, like from head to toe, I was covered in blood. So that because all he asked was what? Where is Muhammad? That's all he asked for. And then he goes across, washes himself with the water of Zamzam, and he lives there for the next 30 days. He lives there next to the well of Zamzam for the next 30 days. Until the 30th day, what happened was, some women, there are two versions, I'll give you the two versions. One version is the version of Ibn Ishaq, where some women were making tawaf, and we told about Isaf and Naila. And Abu Dharr was a very straightforward man. We know in the later part, in the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab, some of the opinions he used to say to the Khalifa, very straightforward. He used to criticize Umar. He said, you have forgotten the ways of Prophet. That's how he used to talk. He was so straightforward man. No shyness or no problem with speaking the truth. Whatever he used to feel here, it comes out immediately in the lips. So this was the man. So he sees these women going around making tawaf and touching Isaf and Naila, the lovers, and then he tells them, if you wanted to worship these gods, why don't you make these statues have intercourse among themselves? They never had their wish fulfilled. They wanted to have intercourse. So that wish never came true. Why did you do this? And then he says something very foul. I'm not going to mention that. Go and find out what he said. It's not for this podium again. Children are here, so I can't say it out. So he says something very mouthful, and the women can't bear it, and they just claim this is their gods. So they call him a heretic and whatnot. They close their ears and they just start running off the place. When they run across, they come across and encounter Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sees these women screaming and running and says, what happened? And they say, there's this heretic who is talking, reviling our gods and whatnot. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam now goes to meet Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, and he tells him, so what's your story? Why are you saying all this and causing confusion in our place? And he says, I am from Ghifar, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I'm Muhammad. Are you after me? Are you looking for me? And then when he says, where did you come from? He says, I'm from Ghifar. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Al-Ghifar, Al-Ghifar. Abu Dharr says, I was almost going to take my hand and about to move his hand from his head. Then another hand, the hand of Abu Bakr stopped me from doing it. Abu Bakr said, no, don't touch the Prophet. Take it easy. And then because Rasulullah was shocked. Here he is struggling to give dawah to his kinsmen. immediate people, and no one is accepting. And then Allah sends someone from deep inside the Arabian Peninsula, and who is come all the way from there seeking Islam, seeking guidance. Allah guides whoever He wants. And Abu Zar immediately accepts Shahada through the hands of Rasulullah ﷺ, and Rasulullah ﷺ tells him something. Listen, you are a foreigner in this place. Don't go about and tell people that you have accepted Islam. Just do with your business and get away from this place. So don't go ahead and expose yourself. What does Abu Dhar al-Ghifari do? Next morning he goes into the streets. Oh, people of Quraysh, I have become a Muslim. All the mobs come across. Boom, 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 boom. Like again, he goes across. The next day he comes and does the same thing. The third day Muhammad comes and says, listen, get away from this place. You have a death wish. I mean, you're trying to kill yourself. Go away from this place. And then when you hear the news, I have declared myself openly, then come back. You know what Abu Zar did? He went back and put it this way. He had spent a week, or more than a week, few weeks with Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's learned some Quran, few ayats. He goes back to his people and he starts giving dawah. Half of the tribe of Ghifar accept Islam through the hands of Abu Zar. The next term, say, just like your Prophet told you that when he declares himself openly, you come to us. If that day comes, we will accept Islam. So when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went, the news of Hijrah went to the people in Arabia, the other half accepted Islam. They had an opposition party who always used to fight with the people of Ghifar. When the people of Ghifar accepted Islam, the whole tribe said, if they have accepted Islam, we will also compete and we will go ahead and accept Islam just like they did. And in the Medinan period, the people of Medina, the Ansar, saw a big sand dust. Like when people walk and the armies march with the animals, there is dust rising in the desert. So when they see the desert, the people are actually afraid because they think that there is an army attacking Al-Madinah. But Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, oh Allah, let it be Abu Dhar. And it was Abu Dhar. Many years later, when they go into the expedition of Tabuk, when the whole army marches out, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, someone missing, like this, someone who's not here, who should be with us. They all look around and say, yeah, Rasulullah, everyone is here. No, someone is missing. There's someone who should be here who is not here. And they go around looking at everyone, no one is here. And then they spot this man with a donkey. At the far end of the horizon, he's walking slowly towards the army. And then everyone is looking and saying, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, that's Abu Dhar. And then he gives a prophecy. What is the prophecy? He came alone, he will live alone, and he will die alone. Many years later, in the Khilafah of Ali radiallahu anh, when Ibn Masud was coming back from Dimashq, in the middle of the desert, where there was no one, he saw a woman standing in the middle of the desert with the janazah next to her. And Ibn Masud was on the top of his camel, and he asked the woman, who does this janazah belong to? And she said, this is the janazah of Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. Ibn Masud jumps from his camel and he cries and he says, by Allah, I testify that the Prophet said that this day will come, and I have lived to see this day. And he was the one who gave the janazah and the burial for Abu Dhar al-Ghifari radiallahu anhu. May Allah elevate their ranks, and may Allah grant us the understanding to live the life of such examples in our everyday efforts. Ameen. So this was Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, and this is the story of some of the people, outsiders who came into Mecca and now they accepted Islam. Now this was the story of Najashi. Now we will move on to the Abyssinian part. While this is happening in the Meccan area, we said there was two delegations that went across. The first delegation came back. The second delegation, led by Ja'far bin Abi Talib, is still continuing to live under the protection of the Najashi. The Quraysh don't stop here. They still want to make sure that the Muslims who left to Abyssinia are brought back. So they sent Amr ibn As and then another man. One narration says this was Amr bin Utbah, and the other narration says it was Abdullah bin Utbah. So between the two of them, someone was there, but the central character here is Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu. Obviously in this time he was not a Muslim, so we'll just use the word Amr ibn As. So Amr ibn As was a spokesman. He was an international spokesman, and he is an international ambassador. He used to visit different places and the different kings, and he was a very good friend of the Najashi. Najashi knew him very well. So Amr ibn As makes a strategy, and he is a very sharp man. So he goes across and he carries gifts, ivory and hide and whatnot from Mecca. And the first day he goes there, he meets all of the ministers, the priests of the king, and he bribes them. He gives them all expensive gifts. And he tells them, listen, tomorrow I'm going to come to the court, I'm going to meet the king, I'm going to tell him about the people who have run away from us, who have reviled our gods and the religion of our forefathers. We want to take these people back to our custody and to our people. This is the ask he puts forward to the ministers. Obviously, when the Najashi is going to hear the news, he is going to consult his ministers for what's happening in the land, and he is going to take their opinions into consideration before he comes with a judgment. So he does that. The next day, he meets the king himself, and he gives him gifts as well. Najashi used to like the hide of Mecca very well. He used to have very good leather. He used to love the leather of Mecca quite a lot. So when he sees the leather, he says, "Oh, fantastic, Omar! You know exactly what I love," and so on and so forth. And ultimately, Amr ibn As goes up and gives the news itself, and he says, "Some people who are renegades from us, who have reviled our gods, have come and taken security in your country. We want you to give up these people." The king says, Najashi says, "Well, I will do that, but until I have not heard their side of the story, I can't make the judgment." Like, he was a just man, just like Muhammad did. He does not take the information at face value. He said, "I hear you, but I have to hear their part of the story as well before I pass the judgment." So next day, the king sends for the Muslims, and the Muslims make a shura, and they decide that Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh would be the Amir of the Muslims, and they sent him across. And when Ja'far bin Abi Talib comes across, and he comes to the court of the Najashi, Najashi asks them, "What is this new religion that you have come up with? You have not followed my religion, which is Christianity, and you have given up the religion of your forefathers, worshipping idols and paganism and so on and so forth. So what is this new stuff that you have come up with? What is this I'm hearing?" And they say, if you want me to read from the narration, I can read this beautiful statement that he made. But however, with time of essence, he says, "We were a people who had dishonored our promises. We had no love for our kindred with our friends. We used to, oppress the weak and the people. We never gave their rights. Might was right. Whoever had power, this person's view is the right thing to do. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to us a man whose trustworthiness and his truthfulness, which we all knew, and he came to us with the message. Allah sent him as a prophet. He came to us with the message to worship Allah alone and not associate with any partners with him, to provide food to the poor, help the needy, and then honor the ties of kinship." So he basically frames the statement in such a way. He says, first he describes the situation before the coming of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he describes the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the message that Islam comes up with, Tawheed and so on and so forth. Then he talks about the character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he talks about the oppression of how Quraysh went through. The reason, if you understand the concept, this is exactly the dawah of Isa bin Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam. When he came and gave the dawah to the people, this is exactly how the people treated him as well, and his followers. So the Najashi was able to connect with this. He was a very staunch Christian, and he said, "Okay, if this is the case, I don't see any problem with what you have to bring, and live happily in my kingdom." Day one, Amr ibn As was totally frustrated with what happened. He could not digest the fact that he was, his dialogue power did not work out in the instant. So next day, he said, "I'm going to cause fitna." Next day he comes to the king and says, "You know what? These people say that your God, who is in this instance Isa bin Maryam," because the Abyssinians were Orthodox Christians who believed that Jesus was God. They gave divinity to Isa bin Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam. So he said they don't believe that Isa was God. Rather, they said that he was the messenger of God. Even though this person himself does not believe that he was God, he is following the religions of the pagan worshipping and so on and so forth. So he just wanted to cause fitna, and he confuses the king. So the king sends out for Ja'far bin Abi Talib and the Muslims. So they come back again, and then the king asks him, "What do you tell about Isa bin Maryam? What do you have to say about Jesus Christ, peace be upon him?" And Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh says, "We say what Allah has told us in the Quran and what a prophet has told us about Isa bin Maryam. We don't come up with anything new. So we believe him to be the messenger of God, the word of God, the spirit of God, the Ruh Allah, and this is what we say. And he was casted to the womb of the chaste virgin woman, Maryam." So this is what they say. And now when he said, "We say what we have said in the Quran," the Najashi says, "Have you brought any of this Quran that you mentioned about? Can you recite something to me from this book that you're mentioning about?" And then now Jafar ibn Abi Talib chooses Surah Al-Maryam to recite. He says, Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad, and he recites how Zakaria was an old man, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with Yahya, and how, Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam was a chaste, believing woman, and how the archangel Jibril came to him in the shajara, in the protection area, the screening area, and he said that Allah has chosen you to have a child. And he said, how can I, a virgin woman, have a child when no man has touched me? No one has touched me, meaning I'm still a virgin, but how can I have a child? And and Jibril said, if Allah has wished, it will be so. And then she became pregnant, and he goes on. Salama radiallahu anha, who goes on to be the wife of Rasulullah, who was the narrator of the hadith, she says, when Jafar started reciting the ayahs, I saw Najashi crying and weeping like a baby. He was overtaken by what he was hearing. And then after he finishes the surah, he picks up a straw under his throne. He just goes down and he picks up a straw and he says, what you have told me and what we believe, the difference is just of this bit. Like you have told us exactly what we believe. So you can live in our land in security, not even for a mountain of gold. I'm going to give these people up. Amr ibn As, take back all the gifts that you have brought. We don't know anything. And then he tells Amr, you are such an intelligent man. Don't you see that these people are coming up with the truth? You need to think yourself, Amr. It's high time that you give yourself a wake-up call. And this was the beginning of the recollections of Amr ibn As. Many years later, this was the starting point of him coming back to Islam. So Amr ibn As, his mission is a failure, and he comes back to Mecca empty-handed. He does not bring anyone back, and this was the case with the hijrah of the people. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wanted to make hijrah as well. So he takes permission from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and permission was granted. He starts migrating across to Abyssinia. On the way, he comes across a tribe named Al-Habish. Al-Habish was led by a man, Ibn Daghanna. Ibn Daghanna was a very honorable man, and he knew Abu Bakr Siddiq because of the trade and the business that he used to do. So he knew Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. By the way, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu was a very famous man in the desert. Like everyone knew him. And one of the reasons when Rasulullah makes hijrah many years later, people identified Abu Bakr Siddiq at many places. So they used to ask him, who is this man with you? And he says what? He is my guide and I'm following him. He is my guide and I'm following him. So they thought that this guy is actually a guide in the desert. But he was saying that he is my guide to Jannah and I'm following him. SubhanAllah, it's called the secret part and the revealed part in a speech. So there was a secret element to it which no one could understand, and then he actually said the truth, but there was a hidden part to that message as well. So this was Abu Bakr. So when he goes and meets Ibn Daghanna on his way, Ibn Daghanna says, where are you going? And he says, my people have oppressed me so much and I can't practice my religion anymore in my land, so I am going to the land of Habasha and I am going to live there and follow my religion. Ibn Daghanna says, you are a man of honor, you are a man of dignity, you are a man who helps the poor and the needy. You can't do this, you can't leave your place. It will be disgrace for your people if you leave them. Let me go back and give you my security so that you can live in your place without any persecution. So Ibn Daghanna escorts Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, comes back to Mecca, and he tells the people of Quraysh, oh people of Quraysh, this man Abu Bakr has my protection. I will give him protection and this man should not be touched. The Quraysh come and accept the protection of Abu Bakr of Ibn Daghanna, and they place one condition. They say what? Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu cannot go out next to the Kaaba and pray in public. He has to pray in his house. That is the only condition. He cannot do any ibadat in the public. Because Aisha radiallahu anhu said, my father was a very soft-hearted man. Whenever he used to recite the ayahs of the Quran, he would cry, and the people, the women and the children who used to gather around him, they would also cry because of his khushu in the salah. This was the man. And then the condition is accepted. Abu Bakr goes ahead and starts reading in his house. But when he does that, in those days there was the front yard. Now we have backyards. In those days they had the front yard, the portico area, in front of the house, which is still part of the house, but it's open, it's not covered. So Abu Bakr is reading salah in the front of his house, within the area as per the condition. But now it is open, the women again gather around and the children gather around and they are listening to the tilawah, and again this is causing fitna. The Quraysh come back and say, see this man, we told him not to pray in public, but he's causing fitna. Abu Bakr Siddiq goes back to Ibn Daghanna and says, listen, I don't want your security anymore. I give back your security, and I want the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want your protection anymore. The next morning, Ibn Daghanna and Abu Bakr Siddiq come back to the people of Quraysh, and Abu Bakr Siddiq says, I have found Ibn Daghanna to be a man of honor and trust, but I do not need his protection anymore. I seek the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then I give my protection back. So they had to do it in public. It can't be a private conversation. So he had to come back, and now he gives up the protection to himself. Now we are in the peak. Now we reach the 10th year of Hijrah, and now we have two important events. Just before this, we have two important events which take place. What are these events? And we are in 7th year, and not even the 7th or 10th year. One of these days, Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, goes on a hunting trip, and he was a lion hunter. He was hunting lions in the desert. I mean, if you've seen some documentaries, you know how tough the desert lions are, and he used to hunt them with bows and arrows and spears. So such was the strength of this man. He was a hunter at the time, and he goes on a hunting trip. While he goes across, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and prays in the public, and then Abu Jahl comes in and reviles him. He just curses Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and says disgusting things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he strikes him in the head, and then it leads to some bleeding, and one of the slave girls sees all of this event that was happening. Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, when he comes back from the hunting trip, she goes and relates everything. He said, you know what happened? She just blah 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 blah. She goes ahead and says everything. Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib was taken with the love of his nephew, not because he was a Muslim, but the love he had for his nephew. And he goes across with the same clothing that he had and the bow he was carrying to Dar al-Nadwa, where Abu Jahl was there, and he just says, gives Abu Jahl a blow, and he says, what? Are you going to fight me when I follow? Are you going to hurt my cousin, my nephew, when I follow his religion? Are you going to hurt him when I follow his religion? And then when he strikes across, Ikrimah, the son of Abu Jahl, and the people of Bani Makhzum come to the rescue of Abu Jahl, and the people of Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib come to the rescue of Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib. Almost the fight broke out, and then Abu Jahl said, no, don't fight anyone, because I indeed have criticized his nephew too much. Like, I have done something evil, so I deserve this. So he basically acknowledged it, and he went back. As soon as he left, the people of Quraysh were flabbergasted. They said, oh man, this is the worst thing that could happen. See what you did? Because you hurt him now, he has now had the support of his uncle, Hamza bin Abdul. Hamza was a very strong man, so now a very powerful man amongst the Quraysh is now a Muslim. Utbah bin Rabi'ah said this to Abu Jahl, and Abu Jahl said, no, he just said it out of anger, he didn't mean it. Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib narrates, I went back that night and I started pondering upon what I said. When I said that statement, I did not have any love for Islam or the message that Prophet ﷺ had come up with. But now I was very hesitant to go back on my word, because changing the statements was not something that it was an easy thing to do in those times. It showed character. If you say something today and you say something tomorrow, that shows the character and the strength of your speech. So for them it was a very honorable thing. And he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the whole night. And he says, I prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the whole night, asking Allah to guide me to the right thing to do. And the next morning when I woke up, my heart was filled for the love of Islam, and I went ahead and accepted Islam on the hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Few days later, according to one opinion, 3 days later, another man accepted Islam. This man was a drunk. This man was a womanizer. And this man used to hang around in the pubs of Mecca. And this man is called Umar ibn Khattab. And this is the man who goes across. Umar ibn Khattab was drunk, super drunk. Every night, he Ikrimah, and Safwan ibn Umayyah, and all these people of his age group, they used to hang in the pubs of Mecca, get drunk, play around with the women and whatnot, and then they come out. One of these nights, he goes about, and he does not find his mates, drinking mates. He does not see any of them in the pubs. So he says, okay, while I don't have anyone, let me do some ibadah. So he comes around next to the Kaaba, and he wants to make the tawaf. Just like us. When is the time we pick the Quran? When we have nothing on the telly, probably, we have nothing to do. The wife, the missus is probably sleeping. Oh, now probably we can read some Quran. Just like us, we don't dedicate time for the Quran. Our spare time becomes time for Quran. Allahu Akbar. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for understanding. So he wants to go and make tawaf around the Kaaba, and he sees one man standing in the dark and praying. And this man was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was standing and praying Qiyamul Layl in the night. And this was pitch dark. Obviously, when I say Kaaba, don't imagine the Kaaba today. You switch off all the lights, switch off, make it pitch dark. There's no lights, no electricity whatsoever. Pitch dark, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is standing under the moonlight, and he is praying Qiyamul Layl. And two narrations. One narration said that he wanted to attack Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another narration said he wanted to scare, just jump around and make noise so that he will get scared and run away. And actually Umar ibn Khattab, he did that way ahead when he was Amir as well. He scared his wife. Atika wants to go ahead and wants to pray in the masajid. So Umar says, it is better for you to pray at home. So the wife says, are you going to change something that Prophet ﷺ agreed with? Prophet ﷺ used to encourage women to come to the masajid. So are you going to change something? Umar was a very protective man. He used to be very protective of his family. So you know what he did? He let the wife go, and then he went around and he says, who? And the wife got scared, and she came back home and she started praying at home. So this was Umar radiallahu anhu. So Umar says, I saw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam praying, and I went ahead and sneaked into between the cloth of the Kaaba and the wall. So Umar was standing like this, so with his back on the Kaaba and the cloth in front of him, and he goes all the way around until he comes and stands right in front of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and he says the only thing which was between me and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the kiswa, was the cloth of Kaaba. And now for the first time he is in the hearing range of the Quran. He is in the hearing range of the Quran, and this is the first time he is listening to the Quran. And another important thing, now he's sober. He's not drunk. His mind is clean, and he can understand what he is reciting. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reciting Surah Al-Haqqa. Al-Haqqatu wal-Maqa, and the ayat goes on. And if you read the surah, it's a very rhyming surah. The first few ayats finish with and then there is noon, and then there is meme, and so on and so forth. Beautiful ayat. While he was reciting, now Umar is sober and is listening to the words, and he's saying, oh, this is so beautiful. These must be words of a poet. The immediate ayah Rasulullah recited, this is not the words of a poet, little do you believe. Now he's shocked. How did he know what I was thinking? So this must be a kahin. This is not the words of a sorcerer, little do you understand. Now he is gone, like he's lost it, like he can't understand what happened. And he's a sober, for the first time he is sober, and he has a sleepless night. The next morning, Abu Jahl in Darul Nadwa says, this problem of Muhammad has become so bad, who can go ahead and kill him? Omar volunteers up, and he says, I will go ahead and kill him because of what happened the previous night. He picks up the sword and he walks out in the streets of Mecca until he meets bin Abdullah. Noaim meets him, and he says, he sees and he understands the anger and the frustration, and Umar carrying a sword. And by the way, Umar was a very tall man. Tabari, in the seerah of the Khulafa, he said, when Umar used to stand with the rest of the Sahaba, it would seem as if everyone is standing and Umar was sitting on top of a donkey. Such was the height. And he had meat, quite a good amount of meat in his arms. He was a wrestler, and he was not fat, but he was fit. He had quite good muscles in his body, and he was very tall. So this is a tall man carrying a big sword, and he was left-handed as well. So the sword is hanging on the right. You have to draw like this, right? You can't draw like this, so you will get stuck. So you have to draw this way. So the sword is hanging on the right, and he is walking in the streets of Al-Makkah. Noaim meets him and says, where are you going? I am going to sort out the man who has divided the community. So he did not say the name explicitly, and now Noaim said, are you referring about Muhammad? He says, yes. Then Noaim immediately says, well, I think you should go ahead and fix your family first. And then he said, come on, before you fix him, fix your family first. Noaim was a Muslim, and he knew that Fatima bint Khattab and Zayd, her husband, was also a Muslim. So why would he do that? Anything and everything can be sacrificed for the safety of Rasulullah. That was the understanding of the Sahaba. Every single Sahaba of Rasulullah, they will put their lives in front, while they have to protect the life of Rasulullah. In Uhud, we know how the companions used to come and stand like shields next to Rasulullah when the attack happened. And each one of them used to fall and die until 7 people died. And with the attacks, with the arrows that were striking. Abdullah ibn Jahash used to stand, and Rasulullah used to just peek up, and Abdullah used to say, "Oh Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, oh Messenger of Allah, hide behind me, stand behind me. Like, don't even try to come up. Let me handle the arrows. Don't you come out and expose yourself." Such were the sacrifice of the Sahaba Ajmain. So this goes across, and now Umar makes a detour, and he marches towards the house of his sister Fatima bint Khattab, and he knocks on the door. And when the knock is heard inside the home, Khabbab is reciting Surah Al-Taha to the sister of Umar ibn Khattab, Fatima, and Zayd bin Said bin Nufail. Zayd bin Said bin Nufail, one of the 10 was given the glad tidings of Jannah. So Zayd was there, and now when they hear the knock, they ask, who is it? And he says, Umar. The moment Khabbab hears Umar, he just goes for the run. He goes into the house and he hides somewhere. Like, who will mess with Umar? Come on. And then the sister immediately rolls up the scroll and she hides it under her leg, and everyone sit down as if nothing is happening, and they all pretend. And when Umar comes in and he says, what was this murmuring I was listening to? Obviously he was referring to the Quran that was being read. And the sister says, nothing, me and husband, it's just the two of us, we were talking. And then Umar says, is it true that you have accepted Islam? Zayd says, now he just makes a very simple statement. He says, so what if Islam is better than our religion? He's basically saying, what's wrong in accepting Islam? That's what he was saying. Umar radiallahu anh jumps on Zayd and starts bashing him. The sister comes to the rescue of her husband and he punches her, and eventually she has a cut, and then blood spills out. Then he sees the blood from the face of her sister. Now he comes to his senses and he comes down. And then he says, bring me what you were reading. The sister says, you are not pure, go and purify yourself. And then he goes ahead and pours a bucket of water on his head, just ghusl, he makes ghusl. So ghusl was in that point in time was just pouring water over your body until the sunnah came across at a later stage. So this was the case, and he pours some water, and then Umar comes back and he recites Surah Taha, the first 8 ayats, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu la ilaha illahu lahu asma'ul husna. And then he reaches the 8th ayat. Umar radiallahu anh says, the one who has sent these ayats must be worshipped. So it was a sign that his heart was now opening for Islam. Where is Muhammad? I want to meet him. The sister comes and kisses the hands and the head of his brother and says, Ya Habibi, my beloved, are you saying that you are accepting Islam? And then she says, where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the house of Al-Arqam bin Arqam radiallahu anhu. He was a 13-year-old boy. For us, it's a 13-year-old boy, and this boy was giving safety and security to the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was the first madrasa. That was the first first school where Islam was being taught. So Umar now marches from the house of the sister, goes to the house of Ibn Arqam, and then he knocks on the door. One of the Sahabas opens the door, and then he sees the sword. Remember, he's a very tall man. So they see the sword first, and then they look up, they say, Umar. Oh, double trouble. They close the door quietly, and they come in and say, it's Umar with the sword. They don't just say Umar, they say, it's Umar. It's not just Umar, it's Umar with the sword. Two trouble. Now, we got two things to worry about now. Then one man amongst them says, so what if it's Umar? And this man was Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, and no one could have said the statement except for Hamza. Hamza radiallahu anh. Hamza says, so what if it's Umar? If he has come for good, we'll accept it from him. If he has come for evil, we will use this sword and kill him, and we'll mow him down right here, and we'll completely close the matter. No problem, bring him in. And then he and one of the companions go in and they get hold of Umar Khattab radiallahu anh, and they bring him back. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and grabs Umar, and he shakes him and he lifts him and moves him around. Remember, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a very calm, composed, medium, average height man. He didn't have much strength, but when he requires strength, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the strength of 30 men. 30 men. And he just jolts Umar and says, aren't you going to give up fighting Islam until Allah strikes you down with a thunderbolt? Are you going to fight us until Allah destroys you? He says, oh Messenger of God, I have come to accept Islam. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says takbir. And when the people who are hiding in the house hear the takbir, they also say takbir. They understand what had happened. And they all make the takbir. And the sound was too loud and they all had to disperse. The moment Umar ibn Khattab accepted Islam, what did he do? He goes out and he starts knocking on the door of everyone's house. He first knocks the door of Abu Jahl and says, oh Abu Jahl, I have accepted Islam. Abu Jahl says, have you done so? Don't do it. I have done so. He was expecting that someone's going to hit him back and go through some persecution. Then he goes to the house of Al-Walid ibn Mughira. Then he goes to the house of Utbah ibn Shayba, and so on and so forth. Nobody dares messing around with him until he goes to the streets of Mecca next to Dar Madwa and he says, I have accepted Islam, and the mobs now start attacking Umar radiallahu anh, and he was just pushing away. You know what he was doing? 2 thumbs, poke them in the eye, move them. Poke them in the eye, move them. And this is what he was doing. He was so tall, nobody would even reach his face, and everyone tries to punch him, he just boom, throw them out. It was almost sunset, and this was happening for a long time, and no one is even able to touch this man. And until Al-As ibn Wa'il comes around and says, are you going to attack the men of Adi when we are his ally? Al-As ibn Wa'il is the father of Amr ibn As. So they were allies of Banu Adi, the tribe of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Are you going to mess with the people of Adi when we are his allies? So basically this was them saying, leave him and go ahead with your business. So that's when the mob stopped attacking, and Umar ibn Khattab goes out back to his job. Abdullah ibn Umar is the one who narrated the hadith. I'll end with this. Ibn Masud radiallahu anhu said, the acceptance of Islam of Umar was an izzah to Islam. The Islam of Umar was an Islam with the entire religion, because until that time we did not pray in public. When Umar radiallahu anhu accepted Islam, the first thing he did was he went back to Muhammad, he said, "O Prophet of Allah, aren't we on the truth? Aren't we on the right thing? So why should we be afraid of our worship? Why don't we go out and pray in the public?" Rasulullah said, we are just but a few, we are just Khalil, we are just few people, I think we should wait. And it is said in one of the narrations that Umar was the 40th person to accept Islam. He was the 40th person to accept Islam, and he was 30 years old at the time. Or and it is the opinion of Ibn Ishaq that he was younger than that, Suyuti, that he was younger than that as well. Allahu Alam. So this was Umar, and immediately Rasulullah agrees, and then they march out and they make two saf. One saf was led by Umar radiallahu anhu, and the other saf had Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, and they marched forward. Nobody could touch them, and they all prayed next to the Kaaba in the public, and from that point in time they started praying in public. So this is where we will stop, inshallah ta'ala, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the embargo, the year of sadness, and then the hijrah, inshallah ta'ala. So tomorrow we'll try to complete the Meccan period, inshallah ta'ala, from Tuesday on. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, inshallah, if Allah gives us life and strength. In 4 nights we will try to complete the seerah, inshallah, of the last 10 years of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. Side note, the 10 years is filled with ghazwa. The 10 years is filled with battles. So I won't go into the specifics of battles. Today I spoke for 2 hours only about Badr, and I still didn't finish Badr. So there's too much information about every battle. Okay? So I'm going to give you main points, key events. So if you have interest, please, I request you humbly, go back and read the Medinan period. Remember the statement of Asma bint Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. When Abdullah ibn Zubair was born, she said he was the first child to be born in Islam. She didn't say that he was the first child to be born in Medina. She said that he was the first child to be born in Islam, as if the first 13 years were a preparation for Medina. So and there was not a single ahkam that was given and made compulsory, giving halal and haram in the Meccan period. All of the rulings came in the Medinan period. After Iqra, 13 years later, Salah becomes compulsory. 10 years later, Salah becomes compulsory. 12 years later, fasting becomes compulsory. 16 years later, Hajj becomes compulsory. 16 years later, Zakat becomes compulsory. And 20 years later, Hajj becomes compulsory. So we need to understand these things quite properly. And the Medina period is filled with events. Like there's so much information that we have to discuss across. So we'll try to concise as much as possible. But I highly encourage, please go ahead and do your part. And inshallah ta'ala, learn more, inshallah ta'ala. It will help in your iman and in your understanding of Islam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the right understanding. Ameen. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira.